A moving crew rolled the first theater curtain through the side door of Naomi Stoltzfus's sewing barn just before sunrise. Dark red fabric hung over both ends of the cart, and old brass rings knocked against the floor. Behind it came another roll, then another, until trucks filled the lane beside Naomi's farm. The Harrington Theater had closed for renovation. Its stage, rehearsal rooms, balcony boxes, dressing areas, and storage loft held 800 heavy curtain panels in more than 40 sizes. The contractor needed all of them gone before the new rigging arrived. Naomi could have the entire load if she accepted the sorting and disposal herself. She was 53, an old-order Amish widow, and a seamstress. She lifted one folded corner toward the light, pinched the cloth, and bent the old top seam where the rings had carried the weight. The face of the curtain was still dense, but the old heading had gone weak. Before the second truck was empty, Naomi chose one short panel and carried it to the north door of her workroom. Cold October wind came through the loose frame hard enough to move scraps on the cutting table. She hung the panel from a light curtain rod, pulled the fabric across the door, and watched the scraps become still. The idea appeared to work in less than 10 minutes. That night, the rod tore out of the wall. The whole curtain dropped across the doorway and trapped one end beneath the door. Naomi found it on the floor before dawn, covered with sawdust and damp along the bottom edge. The fabric had stopped the draft, but the first application had failed because Naomi had treated a stage curtain like a household drape. It weighed almost 4 times as much as the rod was meant to carry. The old heading had also stretched around every brass ring. One more week of use might have torn the top away even if the rod had stayed in the wall. Naomi did not hang it again. She spread the panel across her cutting table and marked every weak section with white chalk. Her adult daughter, Rebecca, removed the rings and the brittle strip of cloth beneath them. Naomi folded a new band of woven cotton webbing across the top and stitched it through several sound layers. They did not use the old holes. Rebecca's husband, Aaron, installed a load-rated wooden track into the solid header above the wall, not into the thin plaster beside it. The track stopped well clear of the door opening. When the panel was open, it rested against the wall and could not fall across the exit. When it was closed, the bottom hung above the floor where it could stay dry. Naomi added a plain washable liner on the room side. The old theater cloth never touched the floor, the stove, or the work table. Then she tested it again. She tied narrow cotton strips beside the door frame and along the wall. With the curtain open, the strips moved each time the wind pressed against the building. With the curtain closed, the strip nearest the old latch still trembled, but the air no longer crossed the room. Naomi placed one thermometer near the cutting table and another in the small storage room beyond it. She wrote the readings down at the same times for 6 evenings. The workroom still needed heat, and the old door still needed repair. Even so, the panel stopped one stream of cold air from crossing the place where she worked. That small difference made the room feel usable longer after sunset. The pile outside the barn still held 799 uncertain panels. Until she identified each lot, Naomi refused to describe any of the curtains as insulation, fireproof, or even clean. The theater's renovation manager, Paul Mercer, had brought more than fabric. He carried a folder that listed where many of the curtains had hung, when they had been cleaned, and which lots had received flame-retardant treatment for public assembly use. The automatic safety curtain at the front of the main stage was not part of Naomi's load. A licensed contractor had removed it separately because its construction and disposal required special handling. That distinction mattered. Some of the 800 panels had records. Others had only a faded tag. Several had no tag at all. Naomi and Rebecca created 4 rows inside an empty equipment shed. The first row held dry panels with clear theater records. The second held dry fabric with uncertain treatment history. The third held pieces with torn headings but sound cloth below. The fourth was rejection. They wore dust masks while opening the old rolls and kept the shed doors wide. Each panel was unrolled on trestles, not shaken in the air. They looked for watermarks, mildew, crumbling backing, oil, paint, rodent damage, and any odor that became stronger when the cloth warmed in sunlight. By the third day, 81 panels had entered the rejection row. One had a green stain along 6 feet of its lower edge. Another released gray powder from an unknown backing. A group from a basement storage room smelled sour even after a full day outdoors. Naomi kept those pieces out of household use. They remained wrapped and went to the textile waste service named in the theater's renovation plan. Naomi kept sorting. On Friday afternoon, Martha King stopped at the farm with a basket of apples. Martha and her husband ran a small bakery from a converted stone building near the county road. Their back workroom had a loading door that rattled whenever the wind came from the west. Martha saw the corrected curtain across Naomi's north door. "Does that old thing truly help?" she asked. Naomi opened it. The cotton strip beside the latch began to move. Then she closed it and let Martha stand at the cutting table. "It helps here," Naomi said. "That is all I know yet." Martha asked for one panel over the bakery's loading door and another between the unheated storage room and the space where dough was prepared. Naomi refused to name a price until she inspected both openings. The bakery visit showed why the inspection came first. The loading door had a broken lower seal and a loose hinge. A curtain might make the room feel better, but it would hide a repair that needed to happen. Martha's husband replaced the seal and tightened the hinge before Naomi measured anything. The interior opening was different. It had no door and allowed warm air to spill into a storage room that did not need it. There, a removable heavy panel could divide the spaces without changing the stone wall. Naomi made 2 pieces from documented dry curtain cloth. She used new washable liners, new webbing, new thread, and hardware rated for the actual weight. Both panels opened completely and remained clear of exits, ovens, burners, and any other heat source. The first installation stayed under observation for 10 days. Martha opened each curtain before the bakery began work in the morning. She checked the fabric and the wall for dampness. At night, after the ovens cooled and the rooms were cleaned, she closed the panels. A small thermometer remained on each side of the interior opening. The rear workroom still cooled during the night. The old stone building still needed heat, but the sharp current of air across the mixing table disappeared, and the unused storage room stopped taking as much warmth from the work area. On the 10th morning, Martha paid Naomi $380 for the 2 fitted panels, their new liners, the tracks, the door inspection, and the installation help. The theater cloth had cost no purchase money. Everything required to make it safe and useful had not been free. Martha told a cabinet maker named Eli Fisher about the result. Eli asked for 4 panels around an open finishing room where cold air entered whenever lumber arrived. Naomi inspected the room and refused 2 of the locations because one was too close to a heater and the other would have covered an electrical panel. She accepted the remaining 2. By the end of October, the first corrected panel had worked in Naomi's shop for 3 weeks. Martha's 2 had worked through several cold nights. Eli's 2 had stopped a cross draft in his cabinet shop without blocking a door, a heater, or a work path. Together, the 5 useful panels supported a narrow claim. Each had solved one specific problem. Naomi still knew almost nothing about the rest of the load. If you enjoy stories where discarded materials have to earn their second chance, subscribe and stay with Naomi, because the next house exposed a problem that no one could see from the sewing table. Daniel Keller lived in a white farmhouse built before electric service reached that road. Its tall front windows had been repaired over the years, but one room still felt cold each winter. Daniel had seen Martha's bakery panels and asked Naomi to make 6 smaller curtains for the windows. Naomi inspected the sashes, checked the frames, and watched thin tissue strips move near 2 meeting rails. A carpenter repaired the worst gaps and added proper weather stripping before she began. She then made 6 fitted night panels from one documented lot of dark green theater cloth. They hung several inches inside the windows on strong tracks. Each could be opened fully during the day. At night, the heavy fabric covered the glass and reduced the cold movement people felt near the chairs. For 4 evenings, the room felt better. On the 5th morning, Daniel pulled back the panel on the north window and found water along the bottom of the glass. The wooden sill was wet enough to darken beneath his thumb. The curtain had reduced air movement in the room, but it had also hidden the coldest surface. Moisture from cooking, washing, breathing, and drying clothes had reached the glass during the night. The closed fabric kept Daniel from seeing the condensation until morning. If that water remained, The old wood could swell, peel, or rot. A warmer-feeling chair was not worth damaging the window behind it. Naomi removed all 6 panels that afternoon. She dried the cloth away from the stove, opened the room, and asked a preservation carpenter to inspect the sashes. He found that the weather stripping had reduced the worst air leaks, but the single glass remained cold. The room also carried more moisture than Daniel realized because wet coats were drying on a rack near the stairs. The lesson was specific. A heavy panel could hide a moisture problem and make a careless routine more dangerous. Naomi changed the design and the rules around it. Window panels would be sold only after the window itself had been inspected. They would hang far enough from the glass for the sash and sill to remain visible. They would open every morning, not stay closed for days. Each owner would check the glass and wood during the first cold week. A room that already collected water on its windows needed the moisture problem corrected before any heavy covering returned. Daniel moved the wet coat rack to a ventilated mudroom. The carpenter repaired a second loose joint. Naomi shortened the panels so their lower edges could not rest against the sill. She added simple tiebacks that held the cloth fully clear of the glass each morning. Then they waited for another cold stretch. For 9 nights, Daniel closed the panels after supper and opened them at sunrise. He wiped no water from the first 4 windows. A small amount appeared on the north window after a large family meal, so that panel remained open until the room dried. The 6th window showed no moisture, but still received the same daily inspection. Naomi did not promise that the routine would work in every house. She had learned that the building, the room, the weather, and the habits inside the room mattered as much as the cloth. The 6 panels went back into service with the new routine written in Daniel's household notebook. He paid only after the cold test ended and the window wood remained dry. That order should have made Naomi more confident. Instead, it made her slower. She now understood that the cloth had 2 histories. One history belonged to the theater. It included dust, cleaning, flame treatment, storage rooms, and years of hanging under its own weight. The other history would begin in a farmhouse or workshop, where moisture, heat, hardware, and daily habits were different. A curtain that had behaved well above a stage could still be wrong for a home. Naomi returned to the equipment shed and narrowed the usable rows. She and Rebecca had already rejected water-damaged fabric. Now they separated panels by exact origin. Red tags marked cloth from the main auditorium with complete records. Blue tags marked rehearsal room curtains with cleaning dates but uncertain treatment history. White tags marked dry fabric with no reliable record. Yellow tags marked sound cloth with failed headings that could be cut away. Each tag only decided which question came next. Naomi sent samples from each recorded lot to an independent textile laboratory. She requested fiber identification and checks for troublesome coatings. Lots that might hang as drapery also received flame behavior testing. The old paperwork helped, but years of dust, humidity, and cleaning meant that each selected lot needed current evidence. The laboratory results divided the pile again. One red tag lot behaved as expected. A second lot did not. Its old treatment had not remained uniform across the samples. A group of blue tag curtains contained 2 different fiber blends, even though the panels looked almost identical from a few feet away. Naomi stopped work on every uncertain lot. Her invoices never called reclaimed cloth fireproof. She restricted the work to private buildings and kept every panel away from required exits, kitchens, furnace rooms, and open flame. Schools, churches, theaters, and public halls would need approved material, current documentation, and their own code review. The theater manager had hoped that most of the load might be reused. Naomi showed Paul Mercer the test papers and the rejection rows. "You may lose half of them," he said. "Then half of them were never mine to sell," Naomi answered. By the first week of November, the original 800 had become a ledger instead of a mountain. 114 panels were rejected for moisture, mildew, powdering backing, oil, paint, or unknown residue. 73 more were held out because their lot history and sample results did not support indoor hanging use. 61 had headings so weak that the useful cloth below had to be recovered as smaller pieces, not rehung at full size. That left 552 dry panels with a clear path for further inspection. Only 314 had the weight, condition, and size Naomi needed for winter panels. The others remained sorted for repair cloth, liners in non-sensitive uses, or future decisions. Even the approved group consisted only of candidates. Every approved panel still needed professional cleaning appropriate to its fiber, a new liner, a new load-bearing heading, new hardware, a measured location, and a cold weather observation period. The first larger request came from Samuel Lapp, who operated a carriage repair shop with 2 wide work bays. The doors closed, but the center joint leaked wind across the floor. Samuel had already repaired the lower seals. He wanted a second barrier inside the bays for nights when unfinished varnish and glue had to remain above their minimum storage temperature. Naomi made 2 wide curtains from matching panels. Aaron built tracks into solid overhead framing, leaving every latch, light, and exit visible. The cloth stopped several inches above the floor. A washable lower guard protected the liner from mud without wrapping the theater fabric in plastic. For the first 3 nights, the panels worked. On the 4th night, a hard west wind pressed against the bay doors. The air pushed through the center joint and filled the space between the doors and the new curtains. One curtain bowed inward like a sail, its lower edge lifted, then slapped against a tool cabinet. The track remained secure, but the moving cloth became a hazard in a working shop. Naomi had solved weight and moisture. She had not solved pressure across a wide opening. Samuel opened the panel and returned his storage to the warmer back room. Naomi removed both wide curtains the next morning. Naomi first considered adding weight to the bottom, then pictured a metal bar swinging towards someone's legs. Fastening the cloth to the floor would only collect mud and water. She rejected both ideas. Instead, Aaron built shallow side channels that guided the panel without locking it in place. Naomi divided each wide curtain into 2 narrower sections. The center edges overlapped, so the wind no longer pushed against one broad sheet. Soft removable guides kept the lower corners from traveling across the room while allowing the panels to release if someone pulled them open. They tested the corrected design first with the bay doors open a few inches on a mild day. Then they tested with the doors closed during another west wind. The 4 narrower sections moved slightly, but they did not sail into the work area. Samuel marked the room temperature at closing time, midnight, and dawn for 12 nights. He compared those records with similar nights from the previous November. The shop cooled as any lightly insulated building would, but the sharp cold band across the floor eased. Stored materials remained within their required range, while the approved heater in the back room ran less often. Samuel paid for the corrected installation and invited 2 neighboring craftsmen to see it after closing. One owned a harness shop. The other repaired clocks in a narrow brick building with a cold stairwell. Neither asked for a copy of Samuel's exact curtain. They asked Naomi to inspect their own rooms. After Samuel paid, winter requests began arriving faster than Naomi could measure them. Rebecca could sew with her, and Aaron could install tracks, but the 3 of them could no longer inspect every building, make every panel, and observe every test without a schedule. Naomi limited the work to private homes and small owner-operated shops. Her inspection card listed size, nearby heat, exit clearance, wall structure, moisture, curtain weight, hardware, cleaning record, and the date of the cold observation. No card meant no cutting. She created 3 standard widths for small doors, windows, and larger workshop bays. Wide curtains were made only in paired sections. Length remained specific to the building because cloth could never drag on a floor. The standards saved time for 1 week. Then the first batch of 12 failed inspection before it left the barn. Rebecca had cut every panel to the correct width. Naomi had sewn new webbing across every top. The liners were straight, and the tracks matched the order cards. But when Aaron weighed the finished curtains, 4 medium panels were much heavier than the others. The dark blue theater cloth in those 4 looked like the cloth beside it. It had come from the same room. Yet its pile was denser, and years of cleaning had changed the way it held moisture from the air. The standard track was rated for the expected weight, not the actual weight of those finished pieces. If the batch had gone to the houses, the mistake would have been hidden above people's heads. Naomi stopped delivery. They weighed every finished panel and wrote the number on its inspection card. Track and fasteners were matched to measured finished weight with a safety margin. Hardware was never chosen from width alone. The 4 heavy panels received stronger tracks in locations with sound wood framing. 2 planned locations did not have suitable framing, so those customers received lighter approved cloth instead. The delay cost 6 days and a second delivery trip. No customer complained after Naomi showed them the weight difference. By the middle of November, 28 fitted panels worked in 9 buildings. None covered a required exit. None hung near a stove, heater, oven, or open flame. Window panels opened each morning and remained part of a moisture check routine. Workshop panels stayed above the floor and clear of tools. The oldest customer was 74-year-old Helen Brooks, who lived alone in a small frame house near the Orchard Road. Wind entered around the door to an enclosed porch. The door itself needed new weather stripping, so Naomi would not hang a panel until a carpenter repaired it. After the repair, a narrow curtain went across the porch side of the opening, not inside Helen's main room. It opened away from the latch and could be tied back with one hand. Helen stood in the room on the first cold evening and looked toward the chair where she read. "The room is not warmer," she said. Naomi waited. Helen rubbed her hands together. "But the cold is no longer walking across it." Helen had described the result better than any temperature record. The curtains controlled where moving cold air reached a person. Word traveled through neighbors, feed stores, repair shops, and families who had visited Martha's bakery. The questions became more careful as the story spread. People no longer asked whether Naomi had free theater curtains. They asked whether their door needed repair first. They asked whether their window collected water. They asked whether the wall could carry the track. They asked what the cleaning and lining would cost. By then, customers arrived talking about damp glass, weak walls, loose doors, and heater clearance. Naomi no longer had to begin every visit by explaining why those details mattered. Then Paul Mercer returned from the theater with an envelope. The renovation schedule had moved ahead. The new windows in the rehearsal wing would not arrive until January, but the rooms had to be used in December. Paul wanted 12 temporary curtains made from the old red panels the theater had originally discarded. For a moment, the request tempted her. Naomi declined it. The rehearsal wing was a public assembly space. The old curtain's history did not replace current approval, and Naomi's small private installation process did not satisfy the theater's code requirements. Paul would need approved temporary products and review from the renovation team and fire official. Paul accepted the answer. Instead, he asked Naomi to make 6 padded moving covers for the theater's restored wooden benches. The covers would be used only during transport and removed before the benches entered the building. For that job, Naomi used sound cloth that had been held out of hanging use, paired with new clean padding and clear inventory labels on the storage bags. The 6 covers paid less than 12 curtains would have paid, but they kept the held-out cloth off public walls and ceilings. The first true winter storm arrived 9 days later. Rain crossed the county before dark, then froze on fences and porch steps as the temperature fell. Wind moved from the northwest through the night. By morning, tree branches shone under ice, and several roads remained difficult for delivery trucks. Naomi's shop stayed closed until Aaron had cleared the walk and checked the roof. Inside, she opened the north door curtain and inspected the frame. The old door still leaked a little near the latch. The fabric was dry. The track had not moved, and the new heading remained flat. Before she could close it again, someone knocked on the outside door. It was Eli Fisher from the cabinet shop. His sister had moved into an older house with a cold stairwell, and he wanted Naomi to inspect it when the roads cleared. 10 minutes later, Martha King's husband arrived from the bakery. Their panels were working, but the rear delivery entrance of a neighboring grocery had the same kind of cross-draft. He carried measurements on a scrap of paper. Naomi folded the paper and gave it back. "I need to see the opening," she said. Before noon, 3 more people knocked. One asked for a curtain behind a wood stove. Naomi refused the location before taking his name. Another wanted 4 panels for a church basement. She explained that public assembly work required approved products and review beyond her small shop. The third had a drafty bedroom window that already collected water. Naomi told him to solve the moisture and window problems first. During the next 2 weeks, Naomi inspected 19 private homes and 6 workshops. She accepted 11 jobs, changed 7 proposed locations, and declined 7 requests entirely. Rebecca scheduled the work by inspection date, not by who offered the most money. Only 11 of the 25 visits became jobs. Still, the line at Naomi's door showed that people had learned to bring her a building problem instead of asking for a free curtain. The cold period lasted long enough to test every new installation. Customers opened window panels each morning. Shop owners checked tracks, floors, and wall surfaces. Aaron returned after the first hard wind to examine the wide paired curtains. One narrow panel at Helen's porch began rubbing against a raised floorboard. Naomi shortened it by another inch before moisture from boots could reach the liner. At the harness shop, a tieback was moved because it hung too near a shelf of metal tools. At Daniel Keller's house, the north window remained uncovered on 2 humid evenings when water appeared on the glass. Those small corrections mattered more than producing a perfect photograph of every finished room. By Christmas week, 76 fitted panels were working in 16 homes and 4 small shops. 21 were window panels with daily moisture checks. 34 divided drafty interior openings or protected repaired doors. 21 worked in paired sections inside low moisture work areas. Another 32 approved panels waited in Naomi's barn with customer cards attached. She would not sew them until each opening had passed inspection. Invoices for completed work totaled $29,460. Naomi's ledger placed professional cleaning, laboratory tests, liners, webbing, thread, tracks, fasteners, transport, rejected cloth, installation help, and weeks of labor beneath that gross figure. The theater had supplied raw cloth. Naomi, Rebecca, and Aaron had turned part of it into 76 winter panels by inspecting, rejecting, measuring, and correcting 3 failures in public view. More than 200 panels had already been rejected or held out of hanging use. Hundreds of others remained only sorted cloth. Naomi did not count them as inventory she could sell until they passed the next decision. On the final afternoon before the shop closed for Christmas, Paul Mercer came to collect the 6 bench covers. He stood beside the first red curtain at the north door, while Rebecca tied the covers around the theater's restored woodwork. Paul could still see a faint chalk line where the original heading had failed. "That was from our main balcony," he said. Naomi pulled the panel closed. The cotton strip beside the latch became still. Outside, another wagon stopped in the lane. Helen Brooks stepped down with a covered basket. She had not come to order anything. She had brought bread and a note showing the morning temperature on both sides of her porch door. Behind her waited a young couple from the Orchard Road. They had 1 repaired window, 1 cold chair, and no interest in a miracle. They wanted Naomi to tell them whether a curtain belonged there at all. Naomi reached for her inspection notebook instead of her order book. In October, the old theater had seen 800 heavy curtains that took up space. Naomi had seen dense cloth, but her first attempt had fallen across a door. She had learned that weight could tear a wall, hidden moisture could damage a window, wind could turn a wide panel into a sail, and 2 pieces that looked the same could demand different hardware. By winter, the neighbors were knocking because she had not hidden any of those failures. She had turned them into the questions asked before every stitch. If you want to follow more people who find value in what others leave behind, subscribe and join us for the next story. Naomi opened the north door for the young couple. The first theater curtain moved quietly along its new track, leaving the doorway clear, while the winter wind stayed on the other side of the room.
Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next one. See you soon.